Josh Sazon is a well-known, well-beloved figure on the Iowa City arts scene. He's an actor, director, cabaret performer, and right now, this coming weekend, he's going to be involved in a performance of the works of Leonard Bernstein at the Coralville Center for the Performing Arts. So Josh, you can start, I suppose, by telling us all about this show and where it's going to be and when.
Well, this is coming up this coming Saturday, October 21st, Coralville Center for Performing Arts. We have a 34-piece orchestra under the baton of Dr. Ed Kotick from the School of Music. We have 6 absolutely wonderful vocalists. Probably a good subtitle for this show is Bernstein on Broadway. While this show celebrates the centenary of Bernstein, all of the material really concentrates on his better-known works, which are wonderful.
Right, and Bernstein is, I guess, most popularly known as a conductor, but he was also a great composer for the Broadway stage in particular, and he wrote some more quote-unquote serious pieces as well. What were some of the Broadway shows for which he's most famous?
Well, everyone knows West Side Story, and we do have quite a few orchestral pieces and a few vocalists from that selection. He's also known for his work collaborating with, what's his name and what's her name?
Sondheim.
Sondheim for West Side Story, certainly, and also lyrics for Candide as well. Comden and Green was what I was thinking of. Betty Comden and Adolph Green, who most people under the age of 50 would probably not know, but he collaborated with them on 2 shows, On the Town and Wonderful Town. And of course, as I mentioned, Candide, which has gone through quite a few iterations over the years. And Bernstein worked with Sondheim for that one, but he also worked with a wide variety of lyricists. And we are doing stuff from that show as well.
Okay, and West Side Story is basically a modern retelling of Romeo and Juliet, isn't it?
It is. I'm sure it's a very compelling story, especially if you haven't heard it before. By the time you reach our ages, I guess it gets a little bit cliched, but back in the day, the story did grab people. Back in the day, this was done in the late 40s. 49 was when Bernstein and the book writer Arthur Lawrence decided to collaborate on this project. And a lot of it had to do with race and ethnic relations. At first, the first iteration of the story was the Puerto Rican Maria was supposed to be this Jewish girl, and the All-American Tony was supposed to be, I think it was Polish Catholic or something like that. And so that dynamic was always there, and it was basically by use of the music, by use of the movement by Jerome Robbins, it was taken to another form, even if the story itself pretty hewed close to that archetype.
But it's basically about gang wars where a girl from one gang falls for a boy from another gang.
Right. It's the same old story, really. Right. And even Shakespeare would be willing to say he didn't come up with it himself. It was based on other stories that came through the years.
Of course. And Candide, of course, is based on the novel by Voltaire, which was written about 250 years ago.
Right. That was first brought about by Lillian Hellman back in, and again, the conception of it started in the early 50s, around 1952, 1953. For those not in the know, Candide is essentially a satire. It satirizes the popular philosophies of the day. And if you remember back in the day, that was the day of the McCarthy witch hunt, so there was a little bit of a modern parallel there. But the gestation period of the show took quite a while. It didn't come out until about either 1956 or 1956.
It was considered sort of a flop at the time, wasn't it?
Oh, it was.
It caught on later.
Well, they did a lot of different variations on it. They rewrote and rewrote. They got in different lyricists to work on the project. By the time that Lillian Hellman, who basically instigated the project, over the years became so dissatisfied with her, with how the show had evolved, that she took her name out altogether. So her version, the really original version, 1956 version, is no longer available for performance. Instead, there is a 70s version that came out in 1970s in New York, 1980s with Harold Prince, and they just went to town with the editing of it, taking out songs, adding songs, putting in new songs, putting in new lyrics. So it's quite a hodgepodge.
And basically the story of Candide is this very naive man who's rather easily led, and his on-again, off-again relationship with a young woman who is also very prone to misadventure.
Right, right. It's a fun show. From what I've heard, because I have to admit, I've not seen an actual production of it myself. I will tell you that the original, the very first Broadway production, pretty much strayed far from the original novel, and since then it's been trying to get back to what Voltaire had originally written. Right now there are, I think, about 5 different versions that you can actually get the license for performance.
All right, and On the Town is set in fairly modern times, like 1950s, and it's about sailors in New York, isn't it?
Put back a decade, 1940s.
1940s.
It came out in 1944, and it started actually.
So it was actually during the war.
It was during the war.
Okay.
You're right. The basic premise of the story is 3 guys going out on the town in New York for Fleet Week. So they have a 24-hour pass, and they get into adventures, misadventures. As far as story goes, it's pretty slight.
Yeah, well, for people who don't know New York City, Fleet Week is a time when the United States Navy's Atlantic Fleet sets down in New York City. And for that week, if you're walking around Manhattan, you're going to see sailors all over the place, just checking out the city, having a fun time. And On the Town is about Fleet Week
Right.
in the 1940s.
Right. Not even the entire week, just one 24-hour period. The humor is a little bit dated. One can argue that it's essentially fluff, but it's still infectious. I was very pleasantly surprised in doing this concert, how the songs stand up fairly well.
Have you done a lot of work with Bernstein's material before?
No, I have not. So that was a very nice opportunity to me to really dig down and examine it. One of the nicer things about working in these kinds of things, and especially with music by Bernstein, don't be fooled. I mean, it's tricky. Everyone may know Maria, anyone may know America, but if I want to be in America, but the rhythms are tricky if you really analyze it.
The songs are not easy to sing. I've tried a few of them.
Most are not. If you're going to sing them properly, most are not, which is not to say they're not adaptable. I've heard jazz singers sing many songs from West Side Story. And in fact, with West Side Story, that was the thing that they were worried about. Bernstein was, and I think Sondheim was as well, is not to make it an opera. That is to say, don't make it a score that only opera singers can sing. It sort of detaches you a little bit from what it's really like. That these are boys, these are girls. They're teenage boys, these are teenage girls with their own syntax, with their own, and they don't sing like opera singers. That having been said, the people I have who are singing the selections from West Side Stories are trained singers, but they bring to it, of course, a different style, and it's gorgeous when sung as such.
Now, you say you've not done much with Bernstein before, but you do have quite a long resume as both an actor and a director, correct?
That's the rumor, anyway.
Right. And you've been here for quite some time. Have you done a lot of acting and directing all over the world, or?
Oh, heavens, no. I did once upon a time, many years ago. And then for a good while after the last time I did it, I did about a 15-year gap before I started doing stage work again. And when I started doing it, I found out I actually rather enjoyed it, so kept on.
Well, here in the Iowa City area, you're best known, I think, for your work as a director of musical productions.
Yeah, well, most of the projects that I've landed are musicals, yes.
And you've also acted in quite a few of them. I recall you were famously the King of Siam once upon a time.
Oh, heavens, you have a good memory. They couldn't find another Asian fellow, balding, middle-aged, I don't know. But I did do that, yes, quite a few years ago.
And the last time you and I worked together, I believe, was Dracula, where I was the title role and you were Renfield, and I got to kill you.
Oh, there you go. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. It was great fun. I enjoyed that one, I have to admit. It was really casting outside the box. So my thanks to the director of that piece, Christina Patrimanis.
It was a very fun show to do. Now, you also have a cabaret act around town here and there, correct?
Oh, gosh. It comes in and out depending on whether we get a venue or we get a booking. We do a lot of standards, so Broadway songs from way back when, 20s to the 50s. Occasionally we do something a little bit more modern just to spice things up. We still do it. Right now, I think our next booking is Shakespeare's Pub and Grill, which is by your old neighborhood, I think.
Of course, and what date is that?
And that's on the 10th, I think. It's a Friday.
10th of November?
10th of November. It's a Friday night. I think Shakespeare is trying to build up a late night clientele in this one. And if you are the type of person who prefers that sort of music, not quite so aggressive and maybe not quite so new, you might actually enjoy this one.
That sounds terrific. Now, tell me a little about what's on your bucket list at this point, because you've done an awful lot, but there must be a few things that you have not done that you'd like, shows that you would like to act in, or shows that you would like to direct.
Oh, heavens. Well, the one that I've been trying to pitch for the longest time, and it's not a relatively known play, is called Nine. It is a musical version of 8.5 by Fellini.
Where did that extra half-inch come from?
They just needed to round it up for rhyming's sake, I think, more than anything else. But that is very interesting. That's a one that has all-female cast. Mm-hmm. And one male, and it's essentially about this male who is hitting 40, having a nervous breakdown, essentially. It's a wonder. The music is absolutely wonderful. There are a lot of featured roles for different women of all ages. You have the wife, you have the mistress, you have the whore, you have the mother, you have the movie star, you have the agent. It's absolutely wonderful. It came out about 30 years ago. It was revived on Broadway probably about 10 years ago. And it's never been done here, and I don't know why.
We certainly don't lack female singers.
No, very good female singers. That's one of the reasons why I'd like to do it. I saw the last Broadway production that they had, and it started with this group of singers, and they're just going la 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 la. But it is the most wonderful, wonderful beginning to a show that I've gone through in a very long time, really.
And can you think of any plays that you would like to act in that you haven't acted in yet?
Oh.
Or maybe ones that you've done before that you'd like to do once again?
Let's see. It would be nice to do Pygmalion, the original Shaw, and I've done Lerner and Loewe twice.
So this would be the straight version of My Fair Lady.
Yes, yes.
And you would like to be Higgins, I suppose?
Yes, but I think I'm getting a little bit too old for that, so I'd take the father, honestly. But it's a good part. It's a good show.
Actually, though, you don't look that old, and Alfie Doolittle is probably not that old himself, if you consider that Eliza is no more than 20.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, yes.
Alfie is probably in his 40s.
Yes. I have to say, well, one of the reasons why I said that I might be aging out of the part of Higgins is the last time I did it, I played against a wonderful wonderful actress, singer, who was less than half my age. So that got that sort of preyed in my mind. But what really got me was when I met her parents, who are absolutely wonderful people and probably about my age, if not younger. So that can get a little bit disconcerting. That having been said, the original Broadway cast, I think the age discrepancy was pretty much the same.
Indeed, it was probably greater because Rex Harrison at that time was in his late 40s.
Right.
And Julie Andrews was just barely 20 at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was interesting. Cyrano de Bergerac would be another one that I'd like to do.
And you would play the title character.
Oh,
in that one as
sure.
well.
Why not? I mean, ham it up. Why don't we? But again,
Well, I would love to see you in that part because I have always wanted to have one of the supporting roles in that part. I never saw myself as Cyrano,
Oh,
but I thought I would make a wonderful De Guiche.
yeah. Actually, that's what I thought you would do, a wonderful De Guiche. It's again, that's a fun show that nobody ever does. The logistics of it are massive. I did see a pretty good production of it at the American Players Theater in Wisconsin just over the summer, and they did a very nice job. I wasn't familiar with the translation, but I thought they did a nice job. It still holds up, is what I'm saying.
Now, there are probably an awful lot of people in the Iowa City, Coralville area who think they might enjoy acting in a play, but they've just never gotten around to pursuing that as a hobby. They maybe don't have the gumption to show up for an audition. You know, people tend to be afraid to appear on stage.
Oh, sure.
How would you advise somebody to just sort of get their feet wet, at any rate, if they had some sort of inclination toward the theater?
How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Audition, audition, audition. Really, auditioning in itself is a skill that I think can only really be honed by doing.
That's something we can talk about too, because I have a problem with auditions in that if I say it myself, I'm not that bad of an actor, but I'm not always a consistently good auditioner.
Okay.
What are some of your tips for doing a really good audition?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that I think you audition fairly well. You read very well, and that's a skill. Not everyone can do that. Ideally, what you like to do, and for most community theaters in the area, they do what are called cold reads. You read from the script. If you can familiarize yourself with the script, not necessarily that specific passage, although if you did know the passage that you were going to be reading, that's even better. But at least understand where you're coming from, what you're going to do, and then you just read. Auditions are a place where you can showcase your skill, but I also have to say that directors don't necessarily choose on the basis of the skill of the actor. Directors have prejudices. Directors have an idea of what kind of person, what kind of actor, what kind of physical type they would like to cast. And it's not, I won't say go as far as saying it's typecasting, but they have their prejudices. So one of the things to have to get through is it's not always you. Now, if you come in 3 sheets to the wind, then maybe it is you. But other than that, there's so many other factors, and all I can say is just be diligent with it. Just
So you do
on.
have to get used to rejection in this business.
Yes, which is, if you think about it, if you're just doing this for a hobby, you're fairly lucky. People do this for work, and to have that kind of rejection time after time after time, I'm sure that wears very, very heavy on the soul.
No doubt about it. So you've got several options in this town, right? You've got Iowa City Community Theater.
Sure.
You've got City Circle, which is basically Coralville's equivalent of community theater.
Well, not quite, but go on.
And then you've got Dreamwell Theater.
Sure.
And Riverside, which is a professional company.
Sure.
If you're lucky enough to be cast, they'll pay you.
No, I don't think anyone ever does this kind of theater for the money.
Right.
Yeah, there is a lot of theater going on in the area, and not only with those particular theaters. For instance, just this weekend, I directed a small play called *1,000 Cranes* over at Uptown Bill's, and that is an odd kind of play that will never be done, or almost never be done in most theater companies in the area. It's too short. It can get a little bit didactic. It's not the kind of show where you expect lots and lots and lots of people to come in, and especially with ICCT and City Circle, that's a big premium for them. They need people to come in. They have expenses. Same thing with Riverside. With Dreamwell, not quite the same thing because their overhead is so low. And that is the big value of Dreamwell right there. They can put on shows that are not necessarily commercial, and they may have only 15 or 20 people in the audience, but for them to be able to get that many, that's a big deal.
Of course. Now, with regard to directing, I know a lot of people will go to the theater, they'll come out, they'll say, it was a good play, but it was badly directed, badly acted. I could have done a better job directing that play.
Sure.
So what advice would you give to somebody who thinks maybe they're cut out to be a director? What goes into that? What sort of a person do you need to be a good director?
Well, directing for the community theater is much different than directing professionally. For me, and this is just for me, I don't know how many people share my opinion or not. There are two sides that you have to satisfy. You have to satisfy the audience, of course. You have to give them a good show. But you also have to satisfy these actors, these volunteers, and they are volunteers, especially performers. You need to respect their time. You need to make them enjoy the work. And I think the director can help with that. And I realize that people might say, oh, this is not professional directing. Well, this is not a professional company that we're talking about. And you have to make your volunteers, your actors, satisfied with their work as much as the audience are satisfied with the resulting show. I think those are the big objectives of directing.
Okay, so you're working with a show that has limited resources, limited financial resources,
right,
and limited talent, because these are people from the community, and some of them are talented and some of them are not.
Okay.
So you're directing a show like that. What are some of the ways that you can minimize the defects and make the bad actors look less bad and make the good actors really shine?
Oh, well, it all comes, for me, it all comes down to casting. If you cast a good person in the part, they will shine. You can sabotage their acting, but why do you want to do that? I will only reflect on you. I have to say the lesser actors. I mean, yeah, you're right. There are some actors who are not quite as skilled, but you have to know how to utilize them, how to deploy them properly, and give them a part that you think they can do. If you think they're capable of doing them, and this is so obvious, I don't know why I'm saying it aloud, then direct them. Let them know. I mean, you can come to the point where you can actually say, okay, this is how you say your line. This is how you move. This is how you stand. And for some actors, especially more seasoned one, I know that they get offended by that. How dare you give me a line reading? But sometimes you need it. And I think with the director, part of the skill there is knowing, will this tactic be effective? Will I be able to give him a line reading? Will he be able to follow a line reading? If he's the kind of arrogant son of a bitch who doesn't like line readings, okay, how can I influence them in that way? And also know that there will come a point where you can't, and you just let it go and just not cast that person again, or or something like that.
And what are some of the main points to keep in mind if you are learning a part? If you say you've already been cast and you've read the play through, but it's not a play that you know really well.
Right.
And you're trying to get acquainted with the part. How do you familiarize yourself with it, and how do you come up with ideas for how you're going to play that part?
Well, I think ideally you'll just start by memorizing. There are some people who believe that, oh, I can't memorize too early. That pretty much locks me up in a particular performance. But I think it actually frees you in a way. You don't have to think about those lines. If you don't have to think about, oh God, oh God, oh God, what's my next line? You're free to be actually in the moment and to react and not just, just move or talk in a pre-programmed manner. It frees you up.
That's my feeling also. I always make a point of memorizing my lines as quickly as I can.
I've seen that. I wish I could say the same for me.
And then there's the question of energy. I remember when I was in high school, my drama coach used to tell me, you have so much energy. I've never seen an actor with so much energy.
Mm-hmm.
I was very, very flattered to hear her say that,
Oh, sure.
but I had no idea what she meant.
I would say that if I told a person that, I don't think I'd use those words exactly, that word energy, but you're very much in the moment, you're very much aware of what's going on. You are reacting, maybe to some people might be overreacting, but you are present.
Right. So
And-
you want to tell the actor to really think about the moment, being in the moment,
Right.
thinking about what's going on.
And you can't even say that if, for instance, they haven't memorized their lines.
Right.
Because they won't be in the moment. You're either in the moment or you're not. You're either basically thinking about dinner after the show or the cast party after the show or not. And it takes you out of it.
Uh-huh.
Takes you out of it.
Right. So some actors, I guess, just have a natural affinity for being in the moment, and some,
I think so. I think so. But
it comes down to concentration, doesn't it?
Not really. And that's a weird thing about it, because as I said, if you have your lines all, pretty much second nature to you, you're not thinking. And if it's a good show, you're not thinking about what should my reaction be. You just are. And when that happens, and it doesn't happen very often, let's face it, I mean, that I think is what gives you that certain sparkle. That's what makes you stand out, because you are most definitely in the moment.
And do you recommend lessons to people who are learning to be actors, or do you prefer that they just sort of learn on the job?
I wish I could tell you. I've not had really any real formal training with acting. Doing something like Shakespeare, for instance, which is fairly, it's a different way of acting, then it does really help to have, to even just intellectually understand why is it written in verse, how do you speak it in verse, as opposed to just plowing through it like any other line, and even worse, trying to overlay an emotion to it. That's sort of the magic of Shakespeare. If you let the rhythms of it go with you, the lines make you act. And but you have to understand that, and not many people do.
Are there other playwrights that you really have to train yourself to be an actor of that playwright's works?
Stylistically, there are different styles of acting. For instance, restoration comedy. It's fairly stylized. There's what can probably be called stock characters.
Now, the Restoration refers to the late 17th century, after the monarchy was restored in England.
Right.
It was the 1660s, 1670s.
Right. And happy days are here again.
Right.
And that can be charming. That can be fun, even for people who don't know or care what it is, if you're doing it right. So it's incumbent about the actors to do it right, to make it work. And there is a way of doing that, but you have to know how to do it.
And what is the difference, the main difference that you perceive between Shakespearean acting and Restoration drama?
Well, I think Restoration is... I think I prefer Shakespeare, just because it's, or even most Elizabethan contemporaries.
Well, we're going to have you back for another show pretty soon. We can wrap this up by saying that we've got to have you back for a description of Shakespearean acting and what that's like, and as opposed to Shavian acting, Restoration acting. We could just go on for hours with
We
this.
could. I'm hoping to direct a Shakespeare production for next season.
And what would that be?
Can I tell it on PATV?
Oh, I
Sure,
think so.
why not? I proposed a production of Midsummer Night's Dream to the Iowa City Community Theater.
Okay.
It's probably Shakespeare's more accessible plays.
That sounds great to me. I'd like to be put in for bottom right now.
You'll have to audition like everyone else,
Well,
sir.
I will, don't you worry. Well, that I guess takes care of that for today. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Josh Sazon, and everybody come out to Coralville Center for the Performing Arts on Saturday to catch this Bernstein show. It's going to be great. In the meantime, thank you all.